as we go along. But thanks for joining us today. I'm Laura Faulkner from Good Things Foundation. Welcome along. Today we have Brian Horn with us from the Learning Machine, who's going to talk to us about becoming a registered provider of the Learning Machine's essential digital skill qualifications. This presentation is part of the Good Things Foundation Essential Digital Skills series. We'll be sharing the link to the other parts of the series later on in the presentation. And I know some of you have been along before, so thanks for joining us again today. Brian's going to introduce the Essential Digital Skill Qualification from the Learning Machine, and among other things, talk about the structure, cost, assessment, resit support, and we'll have time for you to ask questions as well as we go along. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Brian.
Okay, so right. Okay, so is that okay, Laura? We can see that screen. Everyone can see that screen?
Yep, we can see the screen. Brilliant, thank you.
Okay then. Okay, so just to introduce myself, my name is Brian Horn. I'm the responsible officer for the Learning Machine. Quick background to myself, I feel a deep sense of guilt and shame that I'm responsible for a lot of the changes in this space, because I used to work at Ofqual, where I was Associate Director for Vocational Qualifications, and one of the things that I was responsible for in Ofqual was managing the changes in the functional skills space. So I introduced and managed all the changes to functional skills, both in terms of maths and English, but also initiated the early thinking about the IT reviews. And the sort of thinking that happened a few years back led essentially to the digital skills framework. And then obviously now I'm sort of almost gamekeeper turned poacher, having moved across to an auditing organisation, and I'm now responsible for these qualifications. The qualifications themselves I'll talk through in a little while, but I've been asked to have a little chat to begin with about TLM. TLM are quite a small awarding organisation. We have a reasonably large number of centres, and I think the sort of selling point for TLM is that we've been very much IT focused over the years. The way in which we interact with our centres is that we have an online mark.
Oh, Brian, we've lost your sound for a second there.
With me now? Am I back?
Yeah, we can hear you again now. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. So centres can communicate with TLM pretty much in real time. And what that means is that in order to be in the initial stages, we go through a process whereby we share policies with our centres. Centres sign up to the fact that they've read through and they've seen our policies and they agree to our policies. And the policies form part of a package, which is the centre agreement. Once the centre agreement's signed, then centres are expected to upload samples of their own policies, and we carry out risk analysis of our centres. So it's quite a smooth operation and it's quite quick. So centres can be onboarded to TLM pretty much within a few days, providing all the policies are there and we're able to check them. When you're on board as a centre with TLM, then, as I say, the mark book is more of a community really in terms of being able to communicate both with other centres but also with TLM. And work can be uploaded to ourselves for moderation. Material gets sent back pretty quickly, almost in real time, with assessors' overviews and inputs from TLM. And I think those are some of the unique selling points. I mean, obviously, anyone who wants to talk to either me or the staff at TLM, feel free to do so. But as I say, most of it's also covered on our website, where there's quite a detailed sort of graphic which talks through how centres can come on board with TLM. But in terms of the essential digital skills, just focus on that now. As I said, they derive from the national standards, There's a number of awarding organisations out there that are now offering essential digital skills. They're all basically, they have to be built on from the national standards, and they're all roughly the same size. The way that TLM has structured the qualification is we've looked at 5 teaching units with 3 practical tests and an exam in both entry and level 1. So that's the basic structure of the qualification. In terms of the cost, centre status there, it's £600 per year, and there are monitoring visits. There are registration costs attached to the learners, but there's also a number of resit options, which I'll talk about in a little while. So the costs are there for information. Centre monitoring visits are normally a day's visit, and they could be done either person to person as soon as we get through the pandemic. But a lot of the visits and a lot of the interactions will be online, so there will be opportunities to do that as a centre. So the 5 units, going back to the qualification, the 5 units are basically as set out there, and they're based on the national standards. So you've got using IT, creating and editing things, communicating, transacting, and then being safe online. We see the first unit and the 5th unit as being more generic and wraparound units that sort of cover overarching themes. And the unit 2, 3, and 4, the way we've approached those is they are the more focused units, and you'll see how we deal with that in a little while. So under the bonnet of the qualifications then, we have 3 practical tests, and they're focused on units 2, 3, and 4. And the intention is that these are short, snappy tests. There's a lot of support material provided with them, and they're centre marked. They will be available online, and centres will be able to download the tasks, carry them out. There's a lot of flexibility in the tasks. So there will be simple things like making video calls, buying an item online, that type of thing. Obviously, where there are online requirements, such as buying an item, what TLM have done is set up a range of dummy sites. So, for instance, on some of the tests, students and learners are required to go online. There will be a dummy website, and they will fill in details. And again, that captures all the marks. So it's a very quick and it's very automated way of testing learners' skills. We've said they're about an hour in terms of tutor supervised time, and the way we've structured them is we are giving, providing centres with a plan that says in this hour, this is the sort of tasks that you will be expected to complete. The practical tests themselves are probably much less than an hour. We're just providing guidance to tutors to say, typically for setup and phasing with a group, this is the sort of thing that you'd be looking at. The practical assessments are available on demand, and we're providing them within a window. So if you ask for them, they will be available to you for a 2-week period. Very simple mark schemes. It can all be done online. We've looked carefully at this. I used to teach myself, actually, and I remember running around in an A-level chemistry practical class with 20 students and burettes. So I'm fully aware of the demands on tutors. So the tests themselves are designed to make it as easy as possible for the tutor to actually manage a class of students. So that's the practical tests. The examination is an on-demand examination that follows on from the tests. And the way that we've structured it is we ask for the test to be completed, and when the tests have been completed, then automatically online the examination is unlocked. So online the exam can then be taken again on demand, but it is unlocked after the tests. And the rationale for that is it just makes for better teaching, really, and a greater control in terms of standards. If the examination comes up front, it basically covers all the material, and it refers back to many of the skills that are required in the practical. So it makes sense for the exam to sit at the end as a final test of knowledge, skills, and understanding. So the examination, again, is an online, it's relatively simple, it's a structured series of multiple choices, 15 multiple choice questions, basically testing the content. That's what I've just said. So there's one exam, and when the whole package is completed, then automatically the results will be looked at from ourselves. And you can then, and the way the TLM systems work is you can then on-demand certificate. So once everything's gone into ourselves, you'll get a flag back from TLM to say everything's been checked and it's okay to certificate, and TLM then provide permission for that to take place with grades. So that's the structure of it. It's a compensatory model, so we aggregate marks across all the components. So if a student doesn't perform well in one, they can gain marks across the piece. There is a specific level, a minimum bar, a threshold for pass level, but as I say, it is compensatory. We are retiring and rotating the practical sets. Sorry, I had to jump there. No, that's fine. We are rotating the practical tests. Again, that's a method of standards control. It means that students who do it a few months on will not get the same test. So they are replaced and they are refreshed. If a candidate fails the qualification, we'll provide a detailed feedback. So the idea will be that if a student failed in a particular area, we will say to you as a centre, they failed in that particular assessment. So it might well be that we say in the transaction assessment, they did poorly. So that leads us on to the opportunity then to do resits. So talking about resits, when the qualification marks have come in and you've got some information back, I mean, hopefully the majority of students will pass, but they might need to increase their aggregate score. And in order to do that, what we are saying is that we will allow a couple of weeks and then we will allow resits. So qualification components can be resat quite quickly and they can be resat as individual components. So we're not asking for the whole package to be resat, we're asking for the components to be resat. So for instance, if the example I used previously, if the transactional one is the one that failed, then you could put a student back in to do that transactional assessment again. You could build up the aggregate score. So it gives you an idea, and we'll pretty much have that dialogue with you. So if a candidate fails, you will know where they need to concentrate and what they need to do to get back up to the pass grade. We're going to allow two components normally for a year. The first reset will be free, a small nominal cost for the second resit, and learners will not receive the same test. So if they fail on the transactional, then the next transactional test will be slightly different. And the reason is that gives students a sort of fresher bite of the cherry, so to speak. It might help to have a different context. So if one context was buying a holiday, then the next context might be booking a party. And it might well give us students an extra chance. I always used to find as a teacher, again, referring to my own experience, sometimes changing the context, particularly for entry-level learners, is quite a helpful way of giving them a greater access to the assessment vehicle. We will allow third resits, but obviously I think at that point we would be wanting to have a conversation with you, because I think the conversation would be, you know, are students being prepared properly? Is there anything that TLM could do to support students if they're at the stage where a third resit is necessary? We would anticipate Obviously, we can't compromise standards, but we would anticipate that centres would not really get to that point. So in terms of support, I've already talked about the online support that TLM offer, and there is a range of things. One of the things that we do is we do a diagnostic, and the initial diagnostic is free from TLM, and it does allow students to be tested with a series of sample materials that are pretty much in line with the materials that are going to be used in the real qualification. So the diagnostic produces a dashboard. It also produces a printout, a bit like a doctor's report, and it says that, you know, for instance, a candidate is good at online, understands terminology, but perhaps when it comes to understanding hardware or particular components of the software package, they might need a bit more attention. So that's quite a nice way at the start of taking the program and actually developing maybe individualized learner and support packages based on what the diagnostic says. So a diagnostic report on a class will give you an ideal starting point to say, this is where I'm going to concentrate, this is where I'm going to focus the teaching. So there is the diagnostic tool. The whole package, should you be as sad as I am, is available. So that includes things like the assessment strategy, which is a more detailed document setting out the underpinning wiring of the qualification. There's also a range of sample practical tasks and mark schemes. Similarly, delivery guidance in the way I've just talked. So delivery guidance, for instance, we have things like curriculum planners that allow you to work out how the package can be delivered. And there's also sample lesson plans and sample material that could be used. So there's a whole package of support material that centres can access. There's a how-to guide for qualification. And there's also, as we're doing this, we're building up a frequently asked questions section of the website so that centres can have a look at particular issues should they need to. So some scenarios, and this is really talking a little bit about the resits, and this is one where I talked about before. So this is the sort of practical tests going through, and here's the exam unlocked. If a candidate needs to increase their score here, then obviously they can do that, and they'll pass the overall qualification. So that's the resit scenario. Where one of the components needed to be resat, and we can get the mark up to pass. Second scenario, again, two resits, quite simply this bit. They fail there, they fail the exam, they can reset the practical task, they can reset the exam, they can get to a pass mark again on the aggregate score. So in terms of contact details and getting in touch with ourselves, there's the actual physical address in Tamworth. This is the telephone number. Obviously you can contact our own help desk, but also you can contact myself. I mean, on the back of this, there's a lot of questions that I'll go on to answer now, but we'll also answer every question back in a sort of written feedback if needs be. And if anything else occurs, then obviously we can talk it through to you, and we'd be delighted to do that. So I'll finish at that point.
Thanks, Brian. So
shall I stop sharing now?
You can do, yeah.
Yeah.
Then we can see everybody on the call. Andrew's asked a question about the exam being available in different languages, which I think we have a lot of ESOL learners in our network, so that's probably relevant to quite a few people.
Yes, we have done that, and we can have a look at that. I think it would be a question and a dialogue between ourselves, because obviously what we need to look at is the costings of that. So I think in the past TLM have done it, but I think it would be an individual conversation that we need to have about the cost and the language. What we also have to do is to have a look at the, and I know this from experience having worked with Ofqual, we also have to look at the accessibility of the assessment if it's translated into another language, because obviously with the assessments that we've got, we very carefully pitch them so that the language level is one level below the assessment itself. So we need to make sure that that check is carried out if it's a foreign language version. So I think it's, rather than a blanket commitment now, I think it's something that we have done and we're willing to talk through.
Brilliant. So if anyone else has any other questions, please do type them in the chat panel, or I think you've got the facility to sort of raise your hand and unmute and ask. While we're waiting to see if anybody else does have any questions, I wanted to just ask you a few more things about that diagnostic tool, Brian.
Okay.
So do you need to register to get access to that? Because I kind of really like the way it's useful, the way it shows a learner's skills.
No, you can. It is available. I think we would encourage you. I'll be absolutely honest. It's a way of obtaining centre details and contact details for us, but we do expect you to sort of say who you are. But it is available free, and it is a free diagnostic that we provide. So the purpose of it is to, and I think in a way, being commercial about it, it gives you an introduction to the way TLM works. So it is an online diagnostic. It is available, and you can use it.
So do you just get in touch with you?
Yeah,
get an account.
It's on our website. Yeah, and I can provide links after this, but it is on our website. I can get a specific link shared with you so that we can share that.
That would be great, and then I can send it out to everybody in the follow-up email. So obviously, you're openly saying it is a lead into your qualification.
Well, of course it is, yeah, and I think it gives a nice insight into the assessment vehicles and the type of things, the type of questions that we're asking in the qualification itself. So yeah, it is a sampler for the qualification as well as a diagnostic.
Yeah, but there's no commitment to doing your qualification.
No, there's no commitment, no. But as I say, it does give you a flavour of the qualification. It necessarily has to, because obviously what it's doing is it's diagnosing the skill levels to go into those particular qualifications.